Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Christian here. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today we're going to be talking about limited edition products. Now I know that limited edition products and the whole term limited edition now has a lot of people just on edge. We all know that limited edition is what it means now is not what it used to mean like some years ago. So I feel like when it comes to limited edition items, like the only time that it's safe to like truly assume that an item is limited edition anymore is if it's released during holiday. Any other time of the year, if something has limited edition on it, chances are it's going to be around for like an extremely long time unless you're Melt Cosmetics and you release an eyeshadow palette and then 2 seconds later it sells out. I figured we could dive a little bit deeper into limited edition, open that discussion here on my channel, and we're going to start with today's video. So the video that I decided to go ahead and start with was limited edition products that I feel as though brands were smart to make part of their permanent collection. I think I have either 5 or 6 products to talk about today. So I think that at this point you can kind of look at limited edition in 2 different ways, like limited edition items that are made permanent. One, I feel like they use it as a marketing ploy that brands genuinely knew that they were going to make it permanent the entire time. They just slapped it limited edition, made it very scarce to build up hype, build up that like supply and demand to make people want something that maybe if it wasn't limited edition or if it was released out as permanent, people would have waited a little bit longer for reviews, or they would have been a little bit more judgmental when deciding whether or not to put something in their collection. The second reason that I think that brands make things that were meant to be limited edition permanent is because they were not prepared for the success of the product, and it just becomes a really smart move financially for them to make these products permanent because they're gonna sell. They're always gonna sell. They're never not going to sell. So they just have to look at it from a business standpoint and say, yeah, we knew that this was gonna be limited edition, but the hype, the demand is so high for this product that we just feel it's in our best interest to make it permanent. So the products that I'm gonna talk about today, I feel like they kind of meet one or the other, and then sometimes they kind of meet both categories. So I pulled out a few of my products that were meant to be limited edition that are now permanent, and we're going to open discussion, talk about them. Let me know if you agree with these particular items being limited edition made permanent. Let me know if you feel as though they should have stayed limited edition. Let's go ahead and get started with the first product. So the first product I remembered being limited edition, but like when I originally bought it, I remember buying it because I was like, oh, it's limited edition, you know, it's not going to be around forever. I've been wanting to try these powders out for such a long time, but they're so expensive. I don't know, you know, what move to make. So I decided to go ahead and pick up this product. Now I had to like really like find some articles to verify that this product actually was meant to be limited edition, because it's been in the permanent line for so long that I almost was like second guessing myself on whether or not this actually was originally a limited edition product. And it was. So the first product that I think was very smart for the brand to make a permanent item is Hourglass's Ambient Lighting Setting Palette. Now, Hourglass is typically one of those brands that when they say something is limited edition, it truly is limited edition. In my opinion, their face palettes, the ones that they released for the holiday season, the one that comes for 80 bucks, I think that they should get a couple of those in different varying skin tones, and like a light, a medium, and a deep. And I think that those should be made part of their permanent collection, in my opinion, because Hourglass makes really beautiful powders. But anyways, today we're talking about this guy. I do believe it retails for $62 if I'm not mistaken. It's between, I believe, $58 and $62. I will put the correct price somewhere on the screen because I can't remember offhand. I had notes, but my cell phone died. So this particular powder comes with dim light, incandescent light, and radiant light. Now I will be honest in saying that it is more cost effective if you want to try these powders. It is more cost effective to get one of just the regular full sizes because the regular full sizes do come with more product. However, if you want to figure out which shade might be best for you or use them for under eye, a little bit of an all over setting powder, this is absolutely fantastic. I honestly just swirl my brush a lot. You can see that the first 2 shades I use a ton. I use this, I will swirl my brush and then I will just kind of dust it all over my face. It does have a little bit of a light sheen, but nothing so overpoweringly aggressive that you can't use this as a finishing powder, which is essentially what they kind of are. If you have a little bit of a fairer skin tone, you could even go in with this one as like a bronzer topper, or even like as a nice way to kind of, it's not really going to sculpt out your cheeks, but it's going to give you that little bit of radiance around the perimeter of your face if you're interested in that. That is the shade Dim Light. So basically how I use this powders is I will use it as like a buffing powder. So when my makeup is completely on, I would just get a big fluffy brush and I will just buff my entire face with these particular powders. Or I will set my under eye, or if I'm going for a little bit more of a, just like a more natural, softer look and I don't want anything to be too overly powdery, I think that Hourglass was really smart making this part of their permanent line, because I think it's something that is missing from their permanent line. Their powders are so expensive. So if you buy one, it's like I think it's between like 38 and 40 bucks. Even though this is technically more expensive, I just feel like this is a really great way to test out Hourglass products, find that perfect color for yourself. So if you ever do want to go ahead and buy it in the full size, you can. And like I said, I definitely think they should make some of their holiday palettes permanent as well, because they're actually really beautiful. So I think that for an expensive brand like Hourglass, and a brand that typically sticks to their limited edition items being limited edition items, I'm really glad to see this in their permanent collection, because I mean, I've had this powders forever and I use them regularly and they still have not ran out. So I definitely think that that is a good buy, and it was definitely smart of the brand to make it permanent. The next product that I'm going to talk about is definitely a little bit more of a pricier one, and this is one where I kind of feel like the brand was probably going to make it permanent all along, but they released it as limited edition. I also think that the brand could not have expected the hype behind this particular product. This is the most expensive product that I'm going to talk about today. So the hype behind it being the fact that it was a $129 eyeshadow palette. You expect when Kylie Cosmetics to release a $40 eyeshadow palette, you expect that to sell out, or when Too Faced released eyeshadow palettes or YouTuber collaborations, you expect those to sell out, because granted they can still be pricey, anywhere from the $30 to $50 price range. It's not as much of a sting as this baby is. This is the Natasha Denona Sunset Palette. Now, if you are a die-hard Natasha Denona fan, you are going to buy this regardless of the price, regardless of the shades, because you're just a believer in Natasha Denona. This palette came out at like the height of the warm tone eyeshadow palette craze. So by that point, the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette had already been released, and we've seen so many palettes that have this similar color scheme to come out afterwards. It has 15 different eyeshadows. They are all warm tone. They are all very tonally cohesive. Like, you can definitely get some very complete looks out of this. This is a very, I want to say that they released this around springtime. I want to say 2017, like maybe like March or April, I think, if I remember correctly. I do think that this is more of a fall appropriate release than a summer release. But with that being said, it's beautiful. I think that Natasha Denona also corrected her formulation a little bit with her metallics when it came to this palette, as opposed to the Star palette. I do think that this is one of those palettes that nobody expected to sell as well as it did. Like, nobody did, because of the hefty price point. Now, maybe if it had been in the $50 price range, it might have been like, okay, this is going to sell out, or okay, people are really excited about it. And another thing why I think that this palette was so special, like, I'm one of those people that's a Natasha Denona believer. Everything that I've, for the most part, tried from the brand, I have been very impressed and very pleased with. Now, what I will say is, I'll admit that I'm surprised that this palette originally did so well as it did, because I think that when Natasha Denona first came out, people gave her so much hype, but it was hype in the sense of like, bitch, who do you think you are charging so much money for eyeshadow palettes? So I think that people genuinely were just curious about her formulation because it was so expensive for what she was offering. But I think that when it came down to this palette, people were genuinely excited and genuinely like into this. This palette was super on trend. I mean, this is still trendy at this point. Like, the warm tone, we're still seeing palettes like this like today. So even though that warm tone craze really started about 2, maybe even 3 years ago at this point, because when did the Morphe 35O come out? I feel like that was when it like really started, and then everything that we've seen trickle down along the way. I feel like this was a great release, not only because I think Natasha Denona makes really great eyeshadows, but I think that this is a palette that you're going to be able to reach for year in and year out. Like, you know, makeup trends, they come, they go, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think 3 years from now anybody's going to be talking about, you know, mermaid tears and unicorn essence and things like that. But I do think that in the fall, in the winter time, this is a palette that people are going to dust off, pull out of their collection, and they are going to make and create some really beautiful looks. So I definitely think that it was very smart on Natasha Denona's part to make it permanent. However, I think that it probably was going to be permanent the entire time, you know what I mean? So, you know, so great. You guys, I wear my watch all the time and I have the stupid watch tan. So annoying. Anyways, I'm trying to make my videos a little bit shorter and a little bit sweeter. It's still gonna be long because I talk a lot. So moving on, I could not find the original, I could not find my individual for this, but the next thing that I want to talk about is specifically NARS's Hot Sand. Now, when this originally came out, this actually was a limited edition product as well. I want to say that when it first came out, it came out in a duo with Laguna and Hot Sands and their regular black packaging, like the NARS like matte black packaging, and I feel like they ended up making this permanent because there was so much hype behind this particular highlighter. Everybody was talking about it. I feel like, you know, NARS for their blushes, you know, NARS, like NARS is a brand that was super known for their blushes, but I feel like most people didn't really like get on board with a lot of their highlighters. I know that they have like the multiple sticks and things like that, but you didn't really hear people talk about NARS highlighters. Let me swatch this until Hot Sand. And they have since released some highlighters with new formulations that I'm absolutely obsessed with, but I feel like Hot Sand actually put them back on the map. It is a very everyday wearable highlighter that can be made very soft, but can also pack a really nice punch. I feel like it doesn't have any glitter. It doesn't have any glitter whatsoever, and it's gonna give you that, you can kind of see that it's like, it's super reflective, but in like a more natural way. And when this highlighter came out, everybody was talking about it. It was like, everybody was like, NARS, please make this permanent. NARS, make this individual, because I feel like NARS, a lot of things that they do, and I have so many NARS face palettes, but I feel like what they'll do is they'll get a bunch of like their existing shades, and then they'll maybe throw in 1 or 2 shades into the palette to see if people will like it, to see if people will talk about it before they go ahead and make it permanent. But I just think that it's an absolutely beautiful highlighter. I think that NARS has really stepped up their highlighter game over the last year or so, and I'm so happy to see this in their permanent collection. I reach for this particular palette quite a lot. I have a ton of face palettes, and I have a ton of like contour palettes and things like that, blush books, all of that stuff, but I tend to like NARS the most because they're the most compact, and I feel like they give you the best bang for your buck. Like this one, of course, is an all blush palette, but they have palettes that have bronzers, contours, highlights, and things like that. But Hot Sand, it's just gorgeous. And I think that a lot of people, when they originally saw it in the pan, it was kind of like, I'm not gonna like that, that looks so basic, it looks so boring. But when you actually finally got it onto your cheekbones, it was kind of like, wow, we have like an actual winner. And I think it was very smart of NARS to make this permanent. They've released liquid illuminizers since then. They put it in other palettes. They've released it in the single form as well, and I think that it was a really smart plan on their part. I feel like I'm saving the most controversial ones for last. So this guy, this is one of those products that everybody was talking about. This is one of those products that sold every time it restocked last year when it came out. It sold out instantly. You couldn't get it on Sephora's website. You couldn't find it anywhere. The hype behind this was so real. They re-released it this year in their spring collection, and I believe that they are, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did hear that they were actually going to be moving this to the permanent collection. This is the NARS Tantastic Bronzer. Now, if you're familiar with NARS, they have one other staple bronzer, the Omega Bronzer. The Omega Bronzer in, I think it's Tantric, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas I like that bronzer. I think it's buttery. I think it's smooth. I think it can pull a little bit warm. Whereas this bronzer is perfect. Oh my gosh. Like, I've talked about this bronzer before. I stopped using it on my channel, or stopped really mentioning it, because it was a limited edition item. But now that they've made it permanent, I feel like it was a smart move, and I do think that this is one of those products that they had no intentions of making permanent. I think their intentions were to come out with a spring-summer collection, because all of the other products, like the liquid illuminizer, and did the coconut spray come out at the same time as this? I believe it did. I want to say that those, whenever those came out, they say that those were going to be permanent items? I could be wrong, but this one they always said was going to be limited edition. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the other products were always meant to be permanent, and this one was not. But I think that the hype behind this, it tonally, like for my skin tone, is one of the best bronzers ever, like ever. It is buttery, it is smooth, it is all those annoying things that people describe a makeup as, but it's all true. Like, you can pick it up, you can do a slight contour with it, you could just dust it all over the skin. It stays in place all day, it doesn't fade. It can be built up to give you like a very strong bronze or contour if you want that. It never looks muddy, it never looks orange, and it never looks like too much. So this product, I'm so happy that they made permanent, and I know so many people were kind of like coveting and holding on to this because they were like, I never want to run out of it because I love it so much, but I know that it's limited edition, and when it's gone, it's gone. Now it's permanent, we've got it, and I think that that was a very smart move, because while people tended to really like the Tantastic bronzer, the Tantric bronzer, but I feel like a lot of people just couldn't get on board with the color. I feel like they really corrected it with this particular product, and I'm super happy to see that in the permanent range. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about the queen of YouTube collaborations, limited edition products being made permanent. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Jaclyn Hill's. Oh, I didn't realize that mine was completely broken and shattered. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Champagne Pop. So here's my beef with Becca, and I could make this into a whole video in and of itself. Here's my beef with Becca. At this point, we already know, or we should know, that if Becca releases a new shade in a palette, it's only a matter of time before they make it permanent. Becca does not release limited edition products. Like the actual, like for example, the actual palette itself might be limited edition, but the products inside will eventually be made permanent. So that's kind of how I feel about Becca at this point. In the Jaclyn Hill face palette, we had Champagne Pop and Prosecco Pop, which was also made permanent eventually as well. I wouldn't be surprised if every color in here was made permanent, to be completely honest. But I'm only talking about Champagne Pop. I'm not talking about Prosecco Pop today. So the reason why I am going to be mentioning Champagne Pop is Champagne Pop, to be completely honest, just had hype like no other highlighter has ever had hype before. I feel like people, even though the packaging has changed and even though Jaclyn Hill's name is no longer attached to Champagne Pop, I think like for as long as Champagne Pop is on like the stands, people are always going to equate Champagne Pop with Jaclyn Hill. Jaclyn Hill has at this point over 5 million subscribers on YouTube, and these people grow daily. Jaclyn Hill, Nikki Tutorials, Kathleen Lights, all of them have limited edition products with brands that have been made permanent. So I just think that it's a smart business move. I do think that it is a smart business move for some brands to make products permanent that were created by influencers, because these influencers are always going to have new subscribers coming in. These influencers are always going to have new people who are willing and ready to buy their products. I mean, they're only going to grow over time. They're only going to get bigger. So I have my Jaclyn Hill Champagne Pop, and Jaclyn Hill fans are always going to buy it, whether her name is on it or not. But anyways, that's not, that, like I said, that could be a whole nother video in and of itself as well. The reason why I think that Champagne Pop was smart to be made permanent, not just because Jaclyn Hill's name was attached to it, but also because it was a highlighter that went crazy, that everybody was talking about. And yes, everybody was talking about it because Jaclyn Hill's name was attached to it, but also because Champagne Pop is one of those highlighters that can cross a multitude of skin tones. So this is what Champagne Pop looks like right here, and it's one of those highlighters that a lighter skin tone can wear, somebody with a little bit more of a medium tan could wear. I've even seen some girls with a deeper skin tone be able to pull off Champagne Pop. I never really saw too many people in the deep dark realm wearing Champagne Pop, but it's just one of those highlighters that is universally flattering on so many different skin tones, so many different skin types. But that's just Becca highlighters in general. Becca just makes, I feel like they've gotten their highlighter formulation down. They've gotten their blushes down packed. Like, they just, period, make beautiful highlighters. They are some of the most high shine highlighters that you can buy. I was gonna say at an affordable price, but $40 for a highlighter is definitely up there. But there are other highlighters that I own that pack that punch, that pack that impact, that are in like the $60 price ranges. So I do think that in the high-end realm of things, for the consistency that you get, for the blendability that you get, for the high shine that you get from a Becca highlighter, I think that they are fairly priced, dare I say it. And at this point, they just make a good highlighter, and I feel like it was just smart on their part, because it was, again, Becca, I feel like, has a range of highlighters that will flatter a deep dark, and then they have like Pearl and Moonstone that will flatter the lighter spectrum. They have a couple in between. I feel like Champagne Pop actually does, because Becca was another one, not Becca, Opal was another one of those highlighters that everybody was shook over and everybody loved, but I honestly think that Champagne Pop will spread across a larger variety of skin tones than Opal did. I love both. I can wear both. I think it was brilliant that they made Champagne Pop permanent. But again, like I said, at this point, if Becca releases anything limited edition, we already know that it's going to be made permanent at some point. Even the limited edition Chrissy Teigen palette is still out. And the bronzers, the limited edition palette has bronzers in there that are now part of their permanent range. So there's always that. And we're gonna go ahead and mention Jaclyn Hill again, one last time, because I think that this is a really important mention. The Jaclyn Hill face palette by Morphe. I also think it was very smart on their part to make this particular palette permanent, part of their permanent range as well. And I do kind of think that this was one of those situations where they knew that it was going to be permanent. They always knew that it was going to be permanent, but I think to build up a little bit more hype. I don't remember that Jaclyn Hill ever explicitly said that this was limited edition, but it was heavily implied that it was going to be limited edition. I have heard some people say no, she put it on her Twitter that it was limited edition, but I do remember her releasing snaps when this palette first coming out, saying that they were going to restock it as many times as necessary until everybody who wanted one had one. So that kind of let me think, okay, well, it's going to be permanent because they're going to keep it out forever. But then the way she worded it was kind of like, okay, well, is it limited edition? This was kind of one of those products that was like, okay, well, what are you doing? So I will be that girl. I am that girl, like 110%, that if I want something, I will set alarms. If it releases at a time when I am at work, I will magically go spend 15 minutes in the bathroom waiting for it to launch. I am that person. There are certain things that I know are going to sell out that I just have to have, and I have to get it. And I don't know if that's so much the limited edition hype, or if it's just the I want it and I want it now kind of thing. Because again, whenever it's becoming to the point where when things are so popular, you know that they're going to re-release it. You might not get it on the first restock or the second restock, but you'll get it by the third one, and by the fourth one, it's permanent at this point. But the reason why that I think it was very, very smart for Morphe to make this a permanent item, not so much because Jaclyn Hill's name is on it, but, and this is just me personally, I don't own a lot of Morphe makeup. I do have a couple of other YouTuber collaborations. I think Kathleen Lights did a collaboration with them, and maybe did somebody else. I feel like somebody else did. I could be wrong. But when it comes to Morphe in general, like, of course we hear Morphe being shoved down our throats, coupon code this, Morphe's the best brand that, they have the best brushes, they're not just good for the price, they're good for like what they actually have to offer, the quality is amazing, blah 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 blah, coupon code, coupon code, coupon code. So we're already like, at this point, we're already pretty much all over it. I do have some Morphe brushes. They're not the best brushes in my collection, but they're good, and there's a couple of Morphe brushes that I reach for every single day. So with that being said, I kind of wanted to put that out there to say why I think that this was a really smart move to make permanent. Because when you look at Morphe palettes, they are so, and even this palette to a certain extent, I'll admit that, but Morphe's palettes are so tonally similar. They are so 10 shades of brown that it's just kind of like, you look at the palettes and I look at them and I don't get inspired. I don't care that they're only $22. I don't need that particular palette because those shades are in every Morphe palette. They're in every Too Faced palette, every Urban Decay palette, and I don't need a 35 pan palette with 15 of the shades being cool, being warm tone browns. You see what I'm saying? So anytime I've ever looked at Morphe palettes in the past, I was just never excited. I was never intrigued. The packaging was boring, so I'm not gonna get something, I'm not gonna get excited or hype over it because of packaging, because sometimes I do buy things solely based on packaging. I am that girl as well. So the reason why it was smart to make this particular palette permanent is because it is more visually appealing. The layout of this palette was executed a little bit better. I think that, yes, you see these couple of pops of colors and you're kind of like, ooh, it's something different. You see that those darker greens, ooh, it's something different. I mean, it's just the layout of this particular palette. The shadows in here are also creamier, butterier, and smoother. So on the flip side of that, I can also see why this would be like a not good thing, having this particular palette being made permanent, because it's kind of like, well, why aren't all of your shadows like that? But I do think that this palette is very impressive. I do think it was well executed. I do think it was a good palette. I was one of the unfortunate people who got the original launch. that does not have the names on it, that you can see how messy and dirty it gets. And one of my favorite colors in the palette actually fell out, which was kind of annoying. But I mean, all in all, it was just one of those palettes that people were excited to talk about. I heard people who were not the biggest fans of Morphe say that this was actually a good palette. People who, you know, might not have been the biggest fans of Jaclyn Hill were kind of like, you know, we gotta call a thing. Like, this palette was well executed and it was a good palette. I think that would the palette have had all of the hype that it did if Jaclyn Hill's name was not attached to it? Probably not, but I also think that at this point when Morphe releases anything a little bit different or fun or new, people go crazy for it. Like, how often was that setting spray sold out? That 35O palette for a good solid 6 months to a year you couldn't get your hands on. Every time it came out, it sold out. So I think that Morphe just, I mean, I feel like they've got the whole social media business thing down to a science, and they know how to make their products look like, feel like, seem like more than what they actually might be. But this is one of those palettes that I do think lived up to the actual hype. And I do think that overall it's a good staple product. You can pack this palette and take it anywhere and never and not have to reach for anything else. So I do think it was, in those reasons, it's a little bit different when you compare it to other Morphe palettes. Now the palette that they released for holiday, I think it was a holiday, I can't remember, but the one that had the big shadows in the center and then the more colorful ones, that's another palette that I think would have benefited them being made into their permanent range as well, because it had a little bit something more to offer than just what they typically release. Now this next one was definitely like a super controversial release. I know that it made a lot of people mad, it made a lot of people angry, and it's like the limited edition product made permanent that just keeps on giving. I actually talked about this palette in a video to come up very soon. It'll probably get posted before this. If it does, I will link it in the cards and in the bottom bar. But the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette was another one of those palettes that I'm kind of like, I'm not sure if it was meant to be limited edition, but the hype, I feel like it was one of those palettes like they kind of always knew that they were gonna make permanent. In my opinion, I kind of feel that way, because any other palette that Too Faced has released in this layout up until this palette had all been made permanent, but they hyped this palette up in a way that I feel like I can't remember another makeup product. Like, there were not many makeup products that were hyped up to the capacity in which this particular product was hyped up that year. Say what you want to about this palette. It was a sweet peach palette. It was a peach palette with only two peach shades, and I will say that I have said this before on my channel. I think that they tried to explain it away like, oh well, it's all of the shades of peach from the time that it ripens to blah 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 blah. Like, I feel like that was kind of a little bit of a cop-out. I do think that this palette could have been peachier. With that being said, it was a good palette, and a lot of the products that were spawned from this palette have also been pretty good products. There are products from these lines, like the Sweet Peach lines and the Just Peachy line, that I don't like, but I think that this is the palette that just keeps on giving. So they were smart to make this permanent for no other reason than all of the money that they've made from like re-releases and add-ons and extensions of this particular palette. They hyped it up, it sold out. I feel like this has been one of the only palettes that I got excited about that I was not able to get when it initially launched. Now, because I went to go pick this up first thing in the morning, like from my local Ulta store. I live in Houston, you guys. A lot of y'all know that by now. So if I want to find something, like if I really want to find something, typically speaking, I can get my hands on it. It might take all day, and I might have to go to 10 different Sephoras and Ultas, but I will get it. The thing that frustrated me about this is they released this palette in stores a week before the initial launch was supposed to be, or at least at my local stores, a week before it was actually supposed to come out. So I had my alarm set, I was ready, and it had been released already. So they hyped it up. Every influencer was like, this is the best thing ever. It's so great. It's the best thing that Too Faced has come out with. It is the best palette in this kind of layout. Because of course we know about their chocolate bar palettes. It's just the best. Then it disappeared for months. 4 months. And when they decide to re-release it, they release it with a face palette. They release it with highlighters, blushes, lip glosses. So maybe from a consumer standpoint, this was definitely like an extremely annoying limited edition item made permanent. But from a business standpoint, Too Faced was so smart. And that's kind of why I made this video, not from a consumer standpoint, but from a business standpoint, why the brands were smart for making this permanent items. And again, We all know at this point limited edition is not what it used to be. There's a good chance that, I mean, there is stuff on the Sephora website right now that has been limited edition for a year and still on their site. You know what I mean? So I feel like we as consumers have to take that moment and kind of think to ourselves, how bad do we actually want it? Because I don't regret buying any of these products, and I still use all of these products very consistently. That's why I pulled them out of my collection. I'm sure that there is more products out there that could have been made permanent. I think that there are brands who are consistent whenever they say something is limited edition, they mean it. And I think I already said that, but that could be a whole video in itself. But anyways, you guys, I really hope that you did enjoy this video. Sound off in the comments below. Do you agree with me on it being smart that brands made these items permanent? Do you think that the business practices were just shady, that you secretly undercover knew that they were going to make these products permanent all along? They were just trying to build up hype behind it. Let me know some products down below that were limited edition that were made permanent that you were all the way here for. Let me know in the comments down below some limited edition products that were truly limited edition that you would love to see come back, whether it be a re-release or made permanent. I would love to know what you guys have to say about that. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe down below. Turn on those notification bells. I work really hard here on my channel, and I really hope that you will stay for a while. And yeah, you guys, I will see you in the next one.